Hello and welcome to The Humanity of Sales, where purpose meets profit. I am very excited to be back with you today having this important conversation. And boy, do I have an amazing guest for you today. You're going to love the insights that I'm sure he's going to provide for us. But before I dive into introducing him, I want to share a quote, an idea, and a conversation that I recently had. So first, it's a quote, and it's by Jim Rohn. One person caring about another represents life's greatest value. And what we talk about here on the humanity of sales has to do with those human connections. It's important. And in today's world, no matter where you are in the pendulum swing of what people believe in, you're a human being dealing with a human experience, right? And so all of those connection points that we need to feel better, to feel stronger, to feel connected to another human being, and know that we are on the right path, that we're supported, that somebody cares about us. That is very important, especially when going through change. And that people are your greatest business asset, and that you need to serve them in difficult times as much as when it's great out, more so, in my opinion. And so to get to that place of human connection, to finding out what people need, how they can feel supported, how to continue providing them with the skills and the mindsets that they need to be able to thrive, to continue providing a positive environment, an open space where they can feel that there's trust and that somebody has their back. These conversations can continue to happen and need to continue to happen. And so we have been talking about the importance of looking at humans, humanity, the human connection, real human connection. And when you shift to focus on that, you encompass everyone. Everyone falls under the umbrella of human connection. I want to encourage you to subscribe to the channel because I've got some amazing guests coming up. And I also want to let you know that Finding Humanity, my newest book, is now out in Audible. Super excited about that. So we'll put the links for to subscribe and you know how to do that. And then also the link for Finding Humanity into the description area. But if there's anything else that you need, please don't hesitate to reach out to me at heather@heatherhansenoneil.com. And now it's time for my amazing guest, Dan Berta, who is the president of Fairfield County Bank. You're going to love him. Hello and welcome back. I'm very excited here on The Humanity of Sales, where purpose meets profit, to bring our special guest expert to you today. I'm Heather Hansen O'Neill, as you know, and our special guest is Dan Berta, who is the president of Fairfield County Bank. Now, he has been in banking for 35 years. He's been married for 30 years. He's the father of 3, and he's a Ridgefield resident. You can tell from these numbers that he is committed, right? So let's bring him on and really get to know him a little bit better. How are you today, Dan?
Very good. Thank you for having me. That's the best intro I've ever had. Thank you.
Wow, I love that. Okay, we can stop here, folks. No. So, I invited you on because I believe that you live what we talk about here on The Humanity of Sales. Now, our focus is on shining a light on companies who are doing good for their people, for their customers, and in the community. So my question is, how do you at Fairfield County Bank do that? What happens and what's it look like for you?
Sure. I think it starts for us because we are a mutual company. And what that means is we are not owned by shareholders. We really operate believing our community is our customer and the community is our owner. And when you think that way, about the folks you service and help every day, it's a very different perspective. And that's really allowed us to operate a very strong company, but always with the community and the customer as our focus, as opposed to a shareholder or in some cases just the bottom line.
Yes. It's very interesting because it's all in the perspective. Because when your focus is on the people, we believe that the profit does then follow as well. But it has to be on the people first, and it has to be for the right reasons, right? So that tagline that we use, where purpose meets profit, I like to ask about that. So how have you seen it come back, either in the form of more engaged employees, more loyal customers, community who rallies behind you? What are some ways that you've seen it come back?
Sure. Well, you have a great tagline, and we actually use one when we support. We have our tagline of caring for the community since 1871.
Mm,
And we stick to that. And the fact is, where does it come back? When you look at things like our employee retention, our average employee has been with us for over 12 years, and we have employees that have been with us for 50 years. So we look for people that are looking to join a company to stay. We like people who come in with experience and knowledge in many cases. And what they say to us, I'm looking for my forever job, my forever bank. And that's true not only our employees, but of our customers as well. And when you operate with that as your mindset and your culture, it's very much not about what did we do this quarter or this week. Having worked at larger institutions, it's usually what have you done for me lately? And that's a very short term mindset. And we think much longer term. Having been in operation for over 150 years, it's obvious that strategy's worked well for us. But as I said, having employees that have been with us for so long, it just builds a sense of community. And it's less about what have you done for me lately? It's what are we going to do for each other in the long term?
I have definitely seen that you at Fairfield County Bank, you look long term. You build those relationships and not superficial relationships like you're talking about. You build deep, warm relationships. And when it comes to, let's talk about those employees. When they want to find their forever home, they want to contribute. They are in alignment with what you stand for, that culture that you're talking about. I believe that that comes from a match in values. What do you think?
Oh, definitely. In fact, one of the first questions I ask people when I interview them is, tell me about your first job. And what I mean by that is, I want to hear when you started young. What was your work ethic? Where did you go? When someone says to me, oh, my first job was after grad school, I think that's wonderful, but did you really have that desire and drive? And they'll say, well, my parents wanted me to focus on my school. And I say, my parents wanted me to focus on school too, but I needed to go out and do that job to earn and have value. If someone gives you something, it has no value. And so from the second we start speaking to people, I want to hear about their values, their work ethic that go back long before their work career as an adult. I want to hear about their upbringing and why they're tied to their not only the job but the community that they operate in.
Mm.
We expect, or I should say at the very least encourage our employees to be actively involved in the community. We give them time off to serve. We encourage them to be on local boards. We think being part of the community is as important as the services we provide to the community. And those two things really work in tandem for us.
I absolutely love that. That's fantastic. Now, we're going back, right? Yeah, the first career. So how did you get started in banking?
Well, I was one of the lucky ones, I guess, to start in banking back in the early 90s, in fact, 1990, when larger institutions and larger banks did a lot of training programs. And not knowing what I wanted to do, I think a lot of folks, you go into school thinking you might want to know, you get out of school, you maybe know a little bit better, you may do a job for 2 years and you're still not sure what you want to do. I wasn't 100% sure, but I did know I wanted to work for a larger organization that I felt provided a career path and an opportunity. And back then, interstate banking was illegal. So banks were very geographically oriented. And I started with Chase Manhattan Bank. That was a New York based bank. It was where my family was from. I understood the geography. And it provided me an opportunity to get into a large company that had a career path. And then over time, not only did the bank grow, but banking changed and interstate banking became legal, and the bank started to expand from community banking into national banking, international banking. And even while Chase was a big place 35 years ago, it's nothing compared to what it is today. And as that progression happened about 20 years ago, those large institutions really started to shift away from that community and customer focus. They started to shift away from that value of the employee. In fact, the mantra where I was be the investment of choice, the provider of choice, and the employer of choice. And it was in that order. Their primary concern was the investor, the shareholder. And second was the customer, and third was the employee. And when I left that institution and had the opportunity to get back into community banking, the way banking really was, or was more like when I started, I really inverted that. By being a mutual, as I said earlier, we eliminated the shareholder. I never had to worry about a shareholder or somebody who owned some stock telling me how they thought we should run the institution. I put the customer right up there with the employee even, because they're equally important. If I don't have employees, I can't have customers. If I don't have customers, I don't need employees. I don't really look at it as a hierarchy. Now, when my time is best spent, I have tens of thousands of customers, but only a few hundred employees. I really focus on making sure my employees are happy. My employees are loyal and looking to come to work so that they in turn can take care of those 10, 20,000 customers. So that's how I got started, but it's also why I made the transition.
I think that knowing someone's backstory and why they did what they did is really important. And now from that, making these decisions and decision making is a big part of leadership, right? What decisions are you making that lead to the actions that will then trickle down, or I call it ripple effect, right? How it impacts other things. And so your career in moving up into management and leadership, what do you think would be your advice for
Sure.
someone who's looking to do something like that?
And I would say this, you can be very good at your job and do that job or similar jobs for an entire career, and that's fine. Management in itself is a whole different kind of job. And I remember when I first became a bank manager, someone said, well, you don't have any management experience. How are you going to do this? And the response I gave was, well, no one gave me a book on being a parent either, or they did, but it didn't do me much good. You kind of have to do it.
Yeah.
And there are folks that's a very difficult transition. Just because you're good at your job doesn't necessarily mean you're really good at managing. And like anything else, it's a little trial and error. You've got to make those mistakes. Hopefully you make them on a smaller scale. My first management job wasn't being the president of a bank.
Right.
So hopefully I made those mistakes early on so that I didn't repeat them. But over time, and it's cliche, you certainly learn from the good managers you've seen as much as you learn from maybe the poor managers. Mm-hmm. You try to repeat some of the things you liked, you try to reduce the things that you don't. I operate under, I think you want to treat people the way you would like to be treated. It's very cliche, the old golden rule, but it certainly holds true.
It applies, yes.
I am a big believer in time management and making sure you reduce the stress for yourself so that you don't magnify that on your folks. When I was in more middle management, I used to view it as my responsibility was to provide an umbrella and shade for the folks I managed, whereas some of the folks in my role viewed themselves as a magnifying glass. Whatever management told them, they just magnified it down. And I struggled with that. So now in more senior management, I think you set the example by what you do, not just what you say. I think you set the tone. If you're someone who's screaming and yelling, then don't be surprised when your people are screaming and yelling. If you can keep your wits about you when everything else is going crazy, I think that permeates through your organization. I remember when I was managing a branch years ago, I just came into the office and people would come in and ask what I thought were very routine questions. And I would say, why don't you just answer this? Well, the former manager always wanted approval. And as time went on, I empowered them to make the decisions. And I remember right before I was leaving, one of my folks came in and said, oh, by the way, I want to let you know I refunded $1,000 yesterday on a customer's account. I know my authority is only up to 500, but it was a bank error. And I looked at them and I said, that's wonderful. Thank you for letting me know. But my guess is I won't be working here much longer. And she said, why would you say that? I said, because if you're making these decisions without me and they're good decisions, you don't need me any longer. And I thought that was a big transition for her as an employee, that she felt that empowerment to go above and beyond. And it was true. I ended up getting transferred and she ultimately got promoted, which was great.
Oh, that's a great story. I love stories, and my audience loves stories. So I hope when we come back on the other side of our break that you'll have one or two more stories for us. Before we do, I just want to shine a light on, first of all, analogies. I'm also a fan, so I loved your umbrella versus magnifying glass. That was fantastic. But also your openness. I think one of the biggest things that you're right that people get put into a leadership position because they're great at their job and they are not necessarily the same skills, right? But you were open and you knew that this was something that you could learn, right? That you could try, that you could learn, that you were looking for a place that had some training available, and it is. And when people just leave a manager to their without giving them the tools to succeed, that can be hazardous as well. So we're going to take a very short break here, and when we come back, we are going to learn a little bit more from Dan Berta, who is the president of Fairfield County Bank, about his thoughts. As in particular, I think we're going to dive a little bit more into that community contribution. We'll be right back. So, are you loving this conversation with Dan Berta? I know I am. So, in the first half of the show, we were really focusing on leadership and culture. Now, what managers need to become those best leaders, and then also how to create an environment so that your people can thrive, because then they will be inspired to better serve your customers. And when you also really focus on contributing to the community, it all comes together to accomplish the tagline of this show, where purpose meets profit. It will come back in more engaged employees, in more loyal customers, and that is all part of the humanity of sales. Now, two things I'd love for you to think about that we learned in the first half of the show is to ask yourself the question, what are the values that are guiding this organization, your organization, and how can they instruct your decisions, your actions, and your culture? Then I also want you to take a look at the human connection, the importance throughout the whole journey of that human connection and taking responsibility. That's a part that we also discussed. Now, we're going to head back into the conversation with Dan in just a moment, but I want to give the shout out to you to subscribe right now, because if you are enjoying this, you're going to want to know when my other conversations are coming. We've got some great ones coming out to give you different perspectives on what leaders are doing right now to infuse humanity into their organizations, and some advice that you can use to move forward more effectively. That's great, right? So subscribe now, and let's head back into that conversation with Dan Berta, the president of Fairfield County Bank. Welcome back. I'm Heather Hansen O'Neill. You are listening to The Humanity of Sales, where purpose meets profit. And I am here talking to Dan Berta, the president of Fairfield County Bank. We had a great conversation already, and now I want to go a little bit deeper. I love what Fairfield County Bank does to contribute to the community. And in the first part of the show, Dan was telling us that it's part of their DNA. They know that as a community bank, it's so important to be integrated into and to serve the community. So I just like a little bit more from you, Dan. Do you think that's one of the big differences between community banking and like maybe those mega banks?
I definitely think it's a big difference. And I don't want to diminish the contribution large banks make. They do. They'll give millions to organizations. And I think that's wonderful. I think the difference is when you get to a community bank, we operate within our county lines in Fairfield County. We'll cross those borders occasionally, but for the most part, we're within our county, and our giving and our support is within that county. And we really give in multiple ways. The first way we give is by operating our business. We lend money to people in our community so they can grow their businesses, so they can buy their homes, so they can live the dream that they want to live. That's part of what we do. That is our business operations. But within our mission statement, there's other things we do. I mentioned earlier that we encourage our employees to participate. We track our employees hours of volunteerism. In fact, we donate almost 2 full-time employees every year through the hours of volunteerism that our employees do. So that's another way we give back. And then maybe the last way, or certainly maybe the most notable way, is we give back financially. And we give back somewhere between 5 to 10% of the company's profits to over 300 local organizations. And all of that stems from our original mission statement. I said at the onset of the show, we're a mutual bank. Since we do not have shareholders, we view the community as our shareholders. We support them through the loans we make. We support them through the volunteer hours we donate, but we also support them financially. And by giving to over 300 local organizations, we can ensure the community that we operate our business in continues to strive.
Mhm. I think that if I remember correctly, that you have this wonderful like charity of the month, and do your people get to have a part in who that's going to be? Tell us how that works.
Sure. That's something we started, I think, about 4 years ago now. And where that came from was we give to organizations, as I said, but we wanted to provide an opportunity for our customers to tell us where they'd like to see our support go. So what we do each month is we pick a theme, let's say the arts and culture or children's education or American cancer. And we identify local organizations. They're allowed to come to us and say they'd like to participate. They promote the fact that they're a Charity of the Month participant on their social media and sites. We do the same of ours. And then we allow our customers to vote throughout that month who they'd like to see our money directed and given to. And then at the end of the month, we tally that up. We make a donation to that organization. And then at the end of the year, we see who our 11 winners were, and we put them back in, and we do Charity of the Year, and we double that donation to the winning organization at the end of the year.
Just love that. It's the connection points, and you have so many different connection points, and people want to feel a part of. That's the humanity. That's the humanity in business. And, let's stay in the sales realm because the name of the show is The Humanity of Sales, right? We were talking about leadership, right? But now let's just focus on sales, humanity of sales. In my opinion, well, maybe I'll ask you first and then I'll add my 2 cents. What do you think the role that humanity has when it comes to sales?
Mhm. I think it starts with when you're in the financial industry, you are helping people achieve their dreams. I don't think we sell anybody anything. We uncover what are their needs, what are they looking to accomplish? Are they starting a business? Are they buying a home? And then we see where it is we can help them achieve those goals. And if that's what you're doing, then humanity is at the center of that. I'm not selling a widget or selling a car. It's not an emotional purchase. We are helping them either meet their financial needs or achieve their financial dreams. And to do that, there always has to be the humanity at the core of it. I always used to say to folks, if you don't want to get involved with people and humanity, then you go into the veterinarian business.
Yeah.
But even there, you're always dealing with people. And I will say this, people's money, they will talk to you more than they'll speak to their doctor. Your medical things you want to keep private, your personal things. But when it comes to money, you really open up to your bankers and you talk about things. And that's how we find out what it is or where it is we can help them.
Well, they open up because the relationship came first. That trust came first. And so I do think that that's a huge part of it, building the trust. And it ties back to some of the things that you do by giving your people the opportunity and encourage them to contribute and to go out into the community. They're building those relationships all along the journey. Now, I also noticed that you're doing something fairly new from when I had been in that area, or maybe it's just more of a focus. But sometimes when people talk about humanity, they think it's somehow different than technology, right? And I noticed that you're doing this SET program to help people with something that I think is really prevalent right now, that the concerns about cybersecurity. So do you think that being able to do that also ties back to humanity because you're giving them something that they really are concerned about?
I think anything we can do to help customers learn or protect themselves, that's a big part of it. Unfortunately, in today's day and age, cyber theft is a big deal. Frankly, senior fraud and folks going after our vulnerable seniors is a big problem. And we view it as our responsibility to help educate. And if you think about it, what does me educating you on cybersecurity have anything to do with a bank? I make loans, I take in deposits, I transact. But we've just found that unfortunately, people that want to take advantage of folks are using technology to do it. And it is our responsibility to educate and help inform our customers. Unfortunately, a lot of things happen outside of the bank. People are scammed, they're taken advantage of. And while that is not the bank's fault or even the bank's responsibility, in the end, the customer may be the one at the loss, but we feel like it's our responsibility to at least inform them and educate them. And more you're going to hear about that. With the advances in AI, good or bad, AI will be used for very good things, but it can be used for bad things as well. And we've got to make sure we're always staying one step ahead. And people will talk about it, there was a technology problem. It's almost always a human issue that interacts with technology that creates the problem. It's this: the computers aren't taking over the world and running down the street, but they're used as the tool for us humans to maybe do something we shouldn't or click on something we shouldn't, that ultimately results in a financial loss. And remember, when bad people are trying to do things via technology, their ultimate goal is almost always money. So eventually the bank is involved somewhere in that transaction, unfortunately. And that's where that humanity piece. So we do a lot of education, we do a lot of seminars, and we meet with a lot of customers one-on-one to talk about that, because many times, where else are they going to hear that? And that's another role we see we need to provide to our customer base and our community.
You know, I think that what you're doing is really, really important. And I'm going to come back to, we're going to close the show out with that focus on education that we've been talking about. But before we do, I just want to reinforce responsibility as a big part of humanity in business is taking responsibility. I don't know about you, but sometimes out there, I have noticed that people aren't taking enough responsibility when something goes wrong. I think it's part of leading with humanity is having that initiative. What is Spider-Man with great power comes great responsibility. But I think it's an important part of moving forward as a leader is to take responsibility and to do your very best to keep that human connection. And so let's close out the show, Dan, with some education. I mentioned that the viewers, the listeners that we have, really like to take something away. Take something away and to be able to use it. So, what would you like to leave them with to either help them shift a mindset or a strategy or something that you think is important as it relates to moving forward more in alignment with humanity?
Well, I'll do this. I actually teach a personal finance class at WestCon here locally, and there's 4 things I tell my students when they're done with the class they should be doing. And the first one is you should have, and I'm speaking financially because I'm a banker. You should have a budget. You should write things down. You should know, and I've heard stats that if you write something down, you're more likely to accomplish it. So I say that from the financial standpoint, but I would say that with anything you do in your life. If you want to exercise more or lose weight or eat better, keep track of things. So first, let's track everything. See where you're going. Second, I would say from a finance standpoint, always be monitoring your credit so that you can see if something's gone wrong, either from a cybersecurity or a fraud standpoint. Just know where you are and see where you're standing. Third, I would say time is on your side. Make sure if you want to make a change, start sooner rather than later, whether that be saving for college or saving for retirement. Oftentimes we put things off, and time is not your friend if you wait too long. And then lastly, just make sure you're protected, whether that be through insurance or having your wills and other things. And it gets back to what I had said earlier about I'm a planner. I like to know where things are. So those are the 4 pieces of advice that I give to students that are younger in their financial journey. But when I speak to your customers and I think about the humanity of it, and you talk about taking ownership, my grandmother used to say to me, when you point your finger at your brothers and you blame them for your problems, just remember 3 fingers are pointing back at you. You are 3 times more responsible for what happens to you than everybody else you're blaming. So if you take ownership of that, you have a plan, you let time be your friend, and you make sure you're well protected for when things go wrong, I think that's the best advice I can give. I don't know if it answers your question directly on humanity, but those are my talking points to my students.
Well, I love them and I appreciate you sharing them with us today. And I appreciate you sharing your grandmother's wisdom. All the best stuff comes from grandmas, doesn't it?
It does.
So, Dan Berta, president of Fairfield County Bank, thank you so much for spending some time with us today. And listeners, if you absolutely love the show, make sure to share it out with a friend and let us know what you think. Thanks so much. And until next time, enjoy the adventure. So thank you for joining us on the Humanity of Sales, where purpose meets profit. I am your host, Heather Hansen O'Neill. We had an amazing guest for you today, Dan Berta, who is president of Fairfield County Bank. And we're going to continue to have more incredible guests right here. So don't forget to subscribe. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.